scattered rain today, 70 for the high, and scattered storms really off and on for the rest of the week. Highs in the low to mid 80s. Right now, though, kind of holding steady with some overcast conditions, few clouds out there, and 62 on 107.5 The Game.
Oh, 9 o'clock. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher along with you here on your Tuesday. Almost said Monday. It was a long weekend for the Memorial Day holiday. Hopefully everybody was able to enjoy it, being able to lock back in today on what is a short week. And Jack, believe it or not, we are going to be in the month of June by the time the weekend rolls around. Time is flying.
Yeah, we're about the halfway point of the year, man. It's crazy to think about, but yeah, and honestly, it doesn't feel like June in a lot of ways because did you see the temperature for today? It's supposed to be like the 60s today.
Listen, you're talking to somebody that went outside this morning at about 5:15 to get here, and yeah, it was like probably not even 60 degrees at that point in time. It does not feel like we were on the cusp of summer. Certainly, I think it's supposed to heat back up, as the week goes along. But yeah, today does not feel like May the 27th.
No, it doesn't. But did you have a good long weekend?
It was nice. I didn't do a whole lot, which after being in Nashville the week before and driving all around, went to Atlanta, to Nashville, to Athens, to back to Columbia, I was kind of like, I think I just want to chill and not go anywhere for the Memorial Day weekend. So, I just kind of stayed at home for the most part.
Yeah, I don't blame you, man. And as for me, softball, and then finally got to go home yesterday, which is nice. So
you're hanging in Fort Mill for the week?
Yeah. So trying to spend some time back home and stuff, and I'll be back and forth between Columbia and Fort Mill throughout the summer. But yeah, man, busy weekend though with the final weekend of softball here.
Well, it was the final weekend because unfortunately Ashley Chastain Woodard's team did come up short. We'll dive into all of that and what happened over at Beckham Field in just a moment. But it is 9 o'clock. We got to kick things off as always with our Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up.
Time to get hyped.
Here's your 9 a.m. Sandstorm.
Sponsored by George Sink Injury Lawyers. Just call all nines.
It's time for your 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt in the car or at work, call George Sink now at 803 all nines. Unfortunately, if you want to hear Sandstorm at a Gamecock sporting event, you're going to have to wait more than 96 days because Carolina football plays on the road in week number 1 against Virginia Tech. So give me a lot longer than that until you can hear that at a sporting event, as the last sport that, as far as like stick and ball type of sports go, I know track's still going on, golf, all those kind of things. But in terms of the traditional sports that we talk about here, coming to an end for the Gamecocks this year with softball coming up short over the weekend against UCLA. What a series. A lot of highs, a lot of lows, everything in between. I phrased this earlier to Preston. South Carolina outplayed UCLA for 13 of 21 innings over the weekend. Unfortunately, the 8 innings that UCLA played their best softball were the most important 8 innings, that being the last one on Saturday and the following 7 on Sunday.
Yeah, this was a a great start to the weekend for South Carolina. They dominated game one. And then game two, it's looking like they're on their way to another big victory to advance to Oklahoma City and sweep the Columbia Super Regional. But, you know, you had a 4-1 lead going into the seventh inning of game two on Saturday, and you're one out away as the lead starts to slip away from advancing. But you can never get that final out as UCLA was able to rally back, score 4 runs, and it's disappointing when you get that close and it's like you just can't get the job done. And I mean, Ashley Chastain Woodard talked about it after the season ended there. I mean, that's going to be a series that probably haunts her for a little bit here, and it takes her a little bit of time to get over. But especially Saturday, knowing you're that close, I mean, people that watch this team, Gamecock fans, whoever, that's going to be one that stings here for a little bit.
Here's what Coach Chastain Woodard did have to say following the series end about having to refocus after that tough game number 2 loss.
Favor, but I can tell you that we had a lot of conversation about it. You know, I told the broadcasters when I met with them before the game, you know, obviously we were heartbroken right after the game yesterday, and there was a lot of emotion. We quickly debriefed, and we brought the team back here last night, late, right before bed, and we just kind of talked about who we were and kind of just flushing the game and moving on as quickly as possible. I honestly, being transparent, I felt like we did not do a good job of that at Auburn. If you think back to the regular season and the rain delay, we all remember that, right? And so I felt like, okay, we learned our lesson once, you know, in that scenario, like we didn't show up that well the next day, the Saturday game at Auburn. So I felt like it was the right thing, you know, to have some more conversation about it. And it was great conversation. And I really did feel like this morning when we showed up to team breakfast that we had moved on emotionally, you know, but we just didn't get the job done on the field. You know, I felt like, you know, offensively, you know, we just didn't have enough production. You can see that from the box score. You know, we didn't walk enough. We struck out too much. And, you know, hats off to, you know, Terry and Tinsley. They had a really great day. And sometimes that happens. And unfortunately today, it just didn't go our way at the plate.
And let's kind of put ourselves in the shoes of being a South Carolina softball player on Saturday. And outside of Quincy Lilio, none of them had ever been, this deep in the NCAA tournament. You play a phenomenal game on Friday, nearly run rule UCLA, which, I mean, that shocked a lot of people. To beat a blue blood like that in game number 1. You're owning them for the first 6 innings of game number 2. Again, you got a 3-run lead in the 7th inning. Nobody's going to admit it, but we've all been there on teams that are about to win a game. And you start thinking about, man, I can't wait to celebrate with my family, with my friends after the game, with my teammates. We're going to be going to Oklahoma City. Like, those kind of thoughts start to creep into your mind, and then you blink and like, oh, bleep, we got to refocus. We're in a 1-run game. You know, Sam Gress comes back in there after, Jory Hurd had kind of gotten into some trouble there. And one pitch, and baseball and softball are games of inches, right? That ball goes a little bit higher or a little bit lower. We're talking about a pop out. We're talking about a ground out. And one of the greatest moments in Gamecock softball history is they punched their ticket to Oklahoma City for the 3rd time. But all the factors, all the stars aligned in the wrong way, unfortunately, for South Carolina, and the right way for UCLA. Woolery hits the home run over the outfield wall, obviously wins that game. And again, it is so hard when you suffer a crushing defeat like that to get back up for that game the next day. And unfortunately, as we saw on Sunday, South Carolina wasn't able to do that.
Yeah, and honestly, I even think back to before that happened in the 7th inning there. You know, you go back to the 6th inning of that game, it's easy to forget that South Carolina had a real good opportunity to put this game away, to be honest. I mean, even a 3-run lead is big enough to work with for sure. But you go back to that 6th inning, they had the bases loaded. I believe there was 1 out. And, you know, Carly Shelton grounds to second base. UCLA gets the force out at home. And as we all know, she forgot how many outs there were in that moment and went back to the dugout, and she was automatically out. You know, that ended the inning and ended the rally, and you only get 1 run in the 6th. And look, a lot of people are blaming the first base coach. A lot of people are saying, fire the first base coach, all this and that. But it's just one of those things where it's like, you see this in baseball sometimes, but it's like it happens where people are just going to forget things. But in that moment, I do question how you could forget such a big, like how could you forget there's only one out in the end? I mean, that is something that I do think about. It's like that's probably a bit more of a head scratcher than blowing a 3-run lead in the seventh inning, which is still something you don't want to do, but you really did have a chance to. I mean, who knows if you get another run or something after that, but if you're working with a 4-run lead and Woolry hits the home run, it's a tie game. You get to bat in the top of the eighth there.
Yeah, and look, those small, minute details can be what separates programs like where UCLA is right now and where South Carolina obviously aspires to be. UCLA, by the way, clinched more College World Series trips than anybody ever with that win on Sunday, going to, I believe, their 33rd. Obviously, a dozen plus national championships up to this point. There's a reason why they've been there so many times, because they don't make those kind of mistakes. And again, it's a learning process, and we're going to get into what the season's meant for Ashley Chastain Woodard and this program in just a second. But those are the kind of things that teams and players that have never been in those situations before, when you trip up, it ends up costing you dearly.
When we go back to Sunday, and it's the hours after that game. I mean, you could tell that. Or, I'm sorry, the hours after after Saturday's game, you could tell South Carolina looked a little bit timid, a little bit more on edge going into Sunday. And look, when they play loose, they typically play better. And then you see UCLA, they're giggling, having fun, relaxed as can be. I mean, they're the ones that had all the momentum at the time, and momentum is a scary thing, because if you don't have it, it's tough to win. And you look at South Carolina, I just think they got to a point where it's like they were probably overthinking everything, afraid to make mistakes out there, and you just saw a lot of softball that they were playing. That's like, this isn't how they played all year. They were making defensive mistakes in the field with how they were shifted. They weren't able to get the timely hit. They struck out far too much. I mean, there just was no juice, it seemed like, on their side. And, look, after UCLA left loaded with nobody out in the top of the first, despite getting a run, you're probably thinking, like, all right, this is the moment where South Carolina is going to click. They're finally going to get the momentum back. But they just never could. They had their opportunities. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, a few fly balls that go a few feet deeper. We're talking about South Carolina potentially having a chance to win this game in the top of the seventh, but unfortunately that is not the case.
Yeah, and look, I'm with you. I believe momentum is very much a real thing. You mentioned for Game 3 on Sunday, I mean, Ari Rhodey nearly had a 2-run homer that just barely came up to the wall, and if that would have gone a few further, you're talking about something a little bit different there. You can go and nitpick this entire series. At the end of the day, South Carolina just was not able to get the job done, and as crushing of a defeat as this is, as bitter of a taste is in your mouth, whether you were in the stands watching or home watching or on the team as a coach or a player, we all have the belief that with the success that we just saw in year number 1, this is a program that's going to be good consistently for years to come. Whenever they do punch that ticket to Oklahoma City, whether it be next year or in a couple of years, I think it's going to be that much sweeter knowing how close you came this time around and got your heart broken in the process.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is something that you have to learn from. It shouldn't have happened. Number one, you should have been able to win Game 2, but alas, you didn't, and then you lost Game 3. So you move on. You hopefully learn from this. You're going to have a different looking team next year, but you'll have players on the team that are going to be a part of next year's group and are going to remember how painful this was to lose the way they did. And obviously, Ashley isn't going anywhere, so I think they're going to be fine in the future, but I mean, this one is definitely one that really did get away from them.
We'll hear from Coach Chastain Woodard a little bit more coming up next, putting a bow on what was a very successful and surprising to a lot of people first season with her at the helm here in Columbia for Gamecock softball. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Tuesday here on The Game. Tyler right here once again saying about our friends over at Twin Peaks. While something like Gamecock softball has come to an end, there's plenty of other sports dominating TV as of right now, such as the NBA playoffs. As we get closer and closer to the NBA Finals starting on June 5th, there's one place to take in all this amazing action going on with things on the hardwood, and that's with our friends over at Twin Peaks. Get down there for any game, any night of the week. Park yourself on one of the bar stools. Grab some delicious food. Grab one of those 29-degree draft beers and cheer on your team. Cheer against the teams that you hate, or just watch some good basketball in general. Whatever your preference is, Twin Peaks has it for you. TVs as far as the eye can see, tons of delicious food, and of course, those 29-degree draft beers. All this and so much more with our friends at Twin Peaks right down the street from us here in the Vista. Welcome back in. It is the extra point. Tyler Head and Feltree along with you here on your Tuesday, breaking down what happened over the weekend with Gamecock softball over at Beckham Field as their fun season finally came to an end at the hands of UCLA, who punched their ticket to another college softball World Series out in Oklahoma City. I want to get rolling a little bit later on this week. Despite the heartbreak and the pain of the end of the season, there's no doubt that South Carolina earned a lot of respect from a national standpoint with what they were able to accomplish this year. Let's hear from Coach Chastain Woodard after Game 3 on Sunday about earning that respect from a national standpoint.
I just love this place so much, and in the process of building the team and the wins and the losses, and I don't know, like I fell back in love with this place, and so I'm just really excited for the future. I really am, and I think that the respect that we earned on a national level in softball, I think is really a big deal for me. And, the success that we had in the league, and I said from the beginning, that I wanted to get the league from the bottom to the middle. I felt like if we could get ourselves up in the middle of the league standings, that, we'd have a chance to host. And, obviously that came true for us. So I thought that was a huge step in the right direction. Obviously for me, the bright spots are the people. And so I could probably sit here for 5 hours and talk about individual, Sam Gress stories and Ari Rohde, Lexi Winters, Abby Knight stories, and down the roster. But the great thing about coaching is that you're able to stay connected with all of the people that you coach. And, I'm excited for the next step in their lives and being a part of those conversations. And, that's a huge part of the mentorship that happens behind the scenes of helping them be prepared for the next step in life. So, I don't know if I could pick one thing. It's really all of it. It's been a dream come true. It's been wonderful every day to lead the program, and, I'm going to continue to do my best to lead the program, and so that we're talking about something different next year.
And Preston and I were discussing, the commentary team. I know you were obviously at the event over the weekend, but Courtney Lyle, and I forget who the other woman was with her on the broadcast, but there was a lot of surprise with how South Carolina was winning game number 1, how they were controlling game number 2 before obviously UCLA did what they did over the course of those final innings between, the last 2 games there. And I can understand that to a degree because, again, UCLA is a program that's been there and done that a million times before, and South Carolina is not one that is thought of as a historical, great program when it comes to softball. But here's kind of what you're building off of, is saying, okay, you're surprising people in year number 1. You want to get to the point in the next couple of years where doing that isn't surprising. People aren't shocked about, oh my God, South Carolina's beating UCLA. What's going on here? No, that should hopefully become the norm. And there's no denying that Coach Chastain Woodard took many more steps forward than people thought she was going to do in year number 1. Remember, there was the question of, okay, you did what you did at Charlotte. Come do that in the SEC, which, by the way, just got that much harder with the 2 teams that played for the national championship and the dynasty of this sport in Oklahoma joining the conference. And they went out there and went toe-to-toe with all those giants and obviously went pretty deep into this thing, and we're, again, 1 out away from making the first trip to Oklahoma City for the first time in almost 30 years. So expectations for your number 1 by and far exceeded.
Yeah, every sense of the word, South Carolina was far better than anyone could have imagined. Look, you go back to the preseason, they were picked last in the SEC to finish last in the conference. So the fact that they went from, yes, they were middle of the pack during the regular season, but they were still good enough to finish over 500 in the conference at 13-11, win a lot of series. Don't forget, that Oklahoma series was, I think, the real moment where it's like, all right, this team can actually go out here and do something special. Because while they did get swept in that series, all 3 of those losses were 1 run apiece. So if it goes a different way, we're talking about South Carolina potentially roles reversed. South Carolina might sweep that series. So I think this has been a real great first year for the program. And a lot of the transfers that did come over from Charlotte and some of these other schools, they were so impactful this year. And yes, you're losing some of them this year. You're going to be losing people like Sam Gress and Abigail Knight, players like that, Brooke Blankenship, Emma Sellers, players that go down the list here that are going to be really tough to replace. But you have a lot of talent coming back next year. You're going to have Ari Rohde. You're going to have Lexi Winters. You'll have so many other young players in this team that I feel like can be a big part of the future here. And then not to mention, it is going to be a lot easier to sell South Carolina to transfers out there, to players that want to come be a part of a winning program. I mean, South Carolina is already a great place, I think, to live and to play at and stuff. But to be a part of a winning culture, something that is just different from the standard of years past, that is going to be very enticing for anyone that is in the transfer portal.
And that was something else that Coach Chastain Water talked about over the weekend as well, that, you know, with the portal being open now, there were girls that were visiting with the hopeful opportunity of coming and playing for South Carolina. And when you are hosting a super regional, when you have a crowd as into it and rowdy as the one out at Beaconsfield was this past weekend, and yeah, unfortunately you came up short, but again, you took a blue blood to the limit in the first two games there. That is a great endorsement for this program. And what you can do as a coach is saying, hey, I know we didn't get there this year. If you come join my team, you can be the reason why we get there next year. Like, again, it almost writes itself when you have the kind of success they had in year number one. And Coach Chastain, obviously a young coach that isn't far removed from her playing days herself. All of her players seem to love her. Like, I think this is just the start of what's going to be a long and successful tenure for her at South Carolina, hopefully.
This is going – you hit the nail on the head, man. This is going to be the start of something really special, I think. And, look, it may not be going to OKC every single year. Heck, you may not get back to this point right away next year. But, I mean, more times than not, you're going to be very competitive, and you're going to have a chance to go get here almost every single year. I think this is going to be something that the sport of softball at South Carolina – I don't think is any longer an underthought. I think it is something that is going to be, just as competitive and something that people are going to want to watch. The crowds this past weekend and throughout regional play, honestly, for a little bit of the season here, were very good. And I think there's a definite interest in seeing South Carolina be competitive and be super successful in this sport.
I think this reigns true for anything here at South Carolina, especially when you talk about traditional, stick and ball type of sports. If you're successful, you will get the support. Like, if you give people reason to care, people will care. Again, I saw the video you took of the line outside of the stadium over the weekend. That was insane. You know what I mean? Like that's softball. There are other programs in the country that don't have that many people come to all of their games throughout the entire year that were in Beaconsfield over the course of the entire weekend. So again, as tough as it is to swallow, coming off the heels of the weekend, there's a lot of reason to be excited for what's coming next and what's going to be happening going forward, because this is truly just the beginning. And again, expectations far exceeded in year number one.
Oh, totally. I mean, look, the crowds this weekend and the lines that you mentioned, look, I've never seen stuff like that for South Carolina softball. Like, I've covered this team enough to be like, all right, well, they had some really dark ages back in the early 2020s, but they've turned it around, and you have such a likable head coach, too, that is adored by the players, adored by the fans. It really is the start of something that could be very special, not just the rest of the decade, but honestly throughout the rest of her career here at South Carolina as the head coach.
Well, obviously a lot of excitement for what's going on with Gamecock softball. Same can't be said when it comes to Gamecock baseball on the heels of what we learned last week, though some promising news. I'll say that much in terms of some players deciding to return for another season. We'll dive into that coming up next. It is The Extra Point. It's our Ed and Jack Beltry along with you on your Tuesday here on The Game.
This just in, AAA Heating and Air continues to dominate the Midlands with the best HVAC replacement options around. With guaranteed financing, 12 months, no payments or interest, and a 15-year parts and labor warranty, they are setting the standard for new system installations. But did you know they also have great deals on repairs? That's right. If your system is broken and you're short on cash, AAA Heating and Air can still help. They offer up to 12-month payment plans with no credit check required on repairs. That's right. All you need is a valid bank account. So that's all you need there. Don't delay. Call AAA Heating and Air today. Whether it's a replacement or a repair, they've got the deal that you need.
Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tirehead, Jack Beltry along with you on your Tuesday here on the game. We'll stick to the Diamond Sports for the time being. Of course, we spent a lot of time on Friday reacting to the report from John Whittle about the behind-the-scenes stuff happening when it comes to Gamecock baseball and the disastrous season that it was in year number one under Maneri. Again, worst record in the history of their time in the SEC at 6-24, 6-25 when you count the one and done in the SEC tournament. I don't know what I was expecting necessarily, Jack, but it is still a little odd to me that we're creeping up on a week since this thing came out, and we have heard nothing from Maneri, nothing from Donati, nothing from the Athletic Association in general, no comments whatsoever on this behind-the-scenes look at baseball that has some pretty damning stuff in there, for being honest, that you feel like you would either deny or own up to, right?
More so than that, too. Yes, number one, I think by now something should have been said. I'll also just say straight up, yes, Pulmonary said he's coming back. Yes, there have been reports out there saying that he is back. Like, we do know that. However, I think after such a terrible season like the one you had, and how many people are still wondering, hey, is this guy still going to be leading the program? Because not everyone subscribes to Gamecock Central or Big Spur or the State or all these different papers that report on this stuff. But I think there does need to be some official statement here from South Carolina, just not regarding just the reports out there, but also just in general, that they have the confidence in Pulmonary to turn this thing around here. Because right now, the silence is really deafening in a lot of ways, and it's not they don't necessarily need to say anything, but like it would go a long way to be able to say something like, hey, we have his back, or whatever the case is. Like, these statements aren't true, whatever the case might be, something probably should be said.
Well, and look, we're not naive. Again, they're aware this thing's out there. I'm sure they've all read over it themselves, so you can't plug your ears and pretend like you're not hearing these things being talked about. And now that it's something that's obviously swept across the fan base, it's something you truly can't ignore. And again, I don't know what that looks like, if it's Pulmonary issuing an apology, if that's Donati saying, if he just says, hey, we're looking into it, if we're investigating these claims and seeing what's true and what's not, and all that kind of stuff, that is something. Again, it's the confusion of not saying anything that, like you said, is deafening in a lot of ways, because it's almost in a way to a lot of people saying, hey, we know what's going on, and we're just not caring enough at this point to try and, fix it or whatever it may be. Like, there's a lot to this, a lot of layers to it, but I figure at some point somebody has to say something. I just don't know when that's going to be.
I don't know either, because again, we have not really heard much publicly from Jeremiah Donati, honestly, just on baseball in general this year, because the season really has been so bad. And look, and obviously we know the buyout is the main issue here, and that you're not getting rid of him because of that. I also think they're probably keeping him around just because, see what he can do in another year with more so of his own team. But we haven't heard any of that publicly. We have not heard that, and they're never going to say that they're not getting rid of him because of the buyout. Like, they're not going to say that. But to give him another year to see if he could figure this thing out, yeah, like that should be something that we should know publicly in a statement here, just so it seems like because again, we keep hearing that, Terry Rooney's going to be back because Pulmonary said so, and Pulmonary's going to be back because Pulmonary said so. That could be true and all, but again, that he's not the ultimate decision maker here. It is also the board of trustees. It is Jeremiah Donati, who is his boss. So there's a lot that still needs to kind of just be. I feel like there is something that just like a statement could really go a long way here in just giving people some clarity on what is going on here. But it really is a mess when you really think about it. And if this stuff is true that was in that report and some of the things that we've been hearing, then it really is damning, like you said.
Well, while we wait on somebody to say something about this thing, the transfer portal is set to open up coming up in a couple days. We are getting some early movement in terms of guys announcing they'll be entering the portal when it does open up coming up here on June the 2nd. So far, 5 guys have entered the portals, those being Roman Kimball, Ryan Bakes, Caden Gaskin, Wyatt Evans, and then Tyler June as well. That is, 5 total as of right now. And look, you're going to have guys go in the portal every single offseason. That's not, to be unexpected. I think the question becomes of, okay, who else could potentially enter after this? Because, again, looking at these names, nobody really surprising here. We knew Kimball was going to be going in for a while based on what his dad was telling us. Caden Gaskin makes a lot of sense. Maybe Ryan Bakes, a little bit of a surprise, but he is somebody that just came over, this past season himself. But you just wonder, especially knowing what we know now about the behind-the-scenes aspect, how many more guys might end up entering as we get closer to that date starting.
I do wonder, though, because, a lot of the big names have well, a few of them. Bo Holland's just confirmed yesterday he's coming back. You have KJ Scobie coming back. You have Talmadge Lee-Croy coming back. You also have that statement from Ethan Petrie on Twitter yesterday talking about how, don't believe everything you read online and stuff. And, me personally, I don't think he's coming back just because he has a future in the MLB or in the pros, obviously, a early round draft pick. So he'd be crazy to pass that up. But you have stuff like that out there. So you do wonder, can they actually retain a lot of the talented players that they want for next year's team? They're doing it right now. And look, I don't know how many more out there they're going to want to retain, but this is a roster that I still feel like, while it is early, the portal is not even officially opened yet. I still think there are going to be a lot of guys that enter the portal. So just because there's only a few right now and it doesn't seem like everyone's going to be entering like the mass exodus that everyone expected, does not mean that guys are still thinking about what decisions they want to make for the future. So I think there's still going to be a bit more to come because there are a lot of guys on this team that really did not have good years or just did not play much at all that I just feel like would be crazy to come back here next year.
I will say Hollins and Scobie returning, that's huge. And those are guys that we talked about as the season came to an end before we knew all this behind-the-scenes stuff when it came to Coach Maneri, because as bad as the team was, those guys individually performed well as freshmen. Same thing can be said about Gavin Braylon behind the plate when he gets his opportunities. And look, baseball especially, I don't know what the dollar figure is for a high-level freshman these days, but it's probably not the same as it is in football or basketball. But when you have a year of experience in the SEC and show that you and prove that you can play in this league, I imagine all three of those guys, phones were blowing up as before the season was even over, knowing that South Carolina wasn't playing for anything. Like, hey, KJ, hey, Bo, hey, Gavin, we saw what you could do in conference play. Come play for us, and we'll get you to Omaha, or come play for us, and we'll get you this amount of money. Like, I'm sure there were a lot of enticing offers out there. So it is significant they did decide to come back to South Carolina. Also have to throw in there Talmadge Lee-Croy as well, who qualified for the medical redshirt by one game, believe it or not. So you do have some key contributors that are going to be returning. And I want to loop this in with the news that we got over the weekend as well. Is it Josh Gregory? Am I saying his name right?
I think I did not get the right pronunciation of his last name, unfortunately. I think it probably is Gregory, so let's just go with that.
Either way, right-handed pitcher out of the bullpen from Neil Monroe, who does have really solid numbers this past year for the Warhawks. I don't know how I'm supposed to get excited about all these guys because if the coaching staff doesn't change, shouldn't I expect their numbers to go down next year anyway?
Well, it's not even the fact that the coaching staff should change. I think it's more so you can run it back with the same coaches, I guess, if you want to. If you don't change your style of coaching, your philosophy, like if it is actually a serious thing, like we've heard that they don't use TrackMan the way it's intended to be used, that's a major, major red flag because that's technology that you're, number one, paying for, but you're not using it the way it's intended to be used. So that's a problem right there. But I also think just the philosophy in general and how you coach these guys needs to change because if it doesn't, you're going to see a lot of the same results, I think, and guys just regressing and not getting better based on what we saw this year. But, getting a guy like Josh Gregory here, I like his stuff. I mean, the guy throws probably what they're looking for in terms of velocity. And then he's also, strangely enough, he's a reliever. So it's like you don't see pitchers that are straight up relievers this day and age. So getting a guy that could potentially be like a closer, maybe back end bullpen type of arm, that's huge. And, I'm sure people are wondering, well, Jack, the portal's not open. So how is he, allowed to transfer to South Carolina? Well, his head coach did leave ULM a few days ago. And so right after that, Josh was able to enter the transfer portal automatically because when your coach leaves, you have a window to go enter the portal and go look for a new school. Like it opens up regardless. So it can be during the middle of the season too. So, for him to do that, come to South Carolina, and for South Carolina to get him, that's a big deal right there.
I think we're going to comb over all these transfer portal guys with a fine-tooth comb this offseason because, as we read, Coach Maneri and heard from him a lot of the season, well, hey, we got to get better players. Okay, well, now's your chance to do that. Apparently, you have more resources to do that with increased funds through NIL and all that kind of stuff. Now go do it and see if your team can be better next year, because we are all impatiently waiting to see if that's going to happen.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, there's no excuse. If this next year is not any better than last year, then we're talking realistically about, okay, are they moving on from him? Because you cannot have increased funds and be this bad again next season. That is just not an option at this point.
What happened in the NBA playoffs over the weekend? We'll dive into that coming up next to wrap up hour number 1 of the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Tuesday here on The Game. Welcome back in. Extra point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you here on your Tuesday as we wrap up our number one NBA conference finals ongoing. Last night, game number 4 out of the Western Finals. OKC picks up the 128-126 win to pick up the 3-1 series lead. Seemed to be on their way, potentially a gentleman's sweep. Last night was the first real competitive game these two teams have played in this series so far. Down to the wire, fun little back and forth, but this has kind of been dominated by one side or the other prior to last night.
Yeah, and look, the Thunder were just massacred in Game 3 by the Wolves. Who, I saw a story at the flight back from OKC to Minnesota. There was a lot that happened for the Wolves to kind of get the spark lit to lead the way to a 40-point blowout in Game 3. But the Thunder, there's a reason why they won as many games as they did during the regular season. That we're seeing them at this point in the season where they're one win away from going to the finals. I mean, they just are very resilient, and they have such a talented team. I mean, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had 40 points last night. You had Jalen Williams with 34 points. I mean, when you're getting that from two of your top players on the team, and not to mention 21 from Chet Holmgren, you have a very good chance of winning. And now you take this series back to OKC. You should be able to get this thing done in 5, but we'll see if Minnesota can extend it for another game.
The series that has been delivering left and right has obviously been the Pacers and the Knicks. Most recent game coming this past Sunday where the Knicks pick up the 106-100 victory after once again, I don't know what it is, they find themselves down by 20 points and they think, okay, we got them where we want them, as they're able to storm back and pick up the 6-point victory in that one.
It's crazy the things that they are doing because, number one, I believe this is the 3rd time in the postseason they've come back from a 20-point deficit because they did it twice against the Celtics, and then they did it again here against the Pacers. And I believe all 3 of those now have come on the road. So the fact that the Knicks – look, I thought this game was over when the Knicks were down by like 20-something points. And I'm like, all right, the Pacers are probably going to cruise, get this job done. I mean, the Knicks are probably out of it here, and they're not coming back. But – give them a lot of credit. They do fight, and now they've got themselves a series here where they're going back to MSG regardless of what happens tonight in Game 4. If you can get this series tied up at 2, going back to New York, you really do have a chance to get this thing back in control and potentially take a 3-2 series lead back to Indiana for Game 6 on Saturday.
Karl Anthony Towns, 20 points in the fourth quarter of that game on Sunday to help propel the Knicks to that victory, as it is a 2-1 series lead for the Pacers as of right now, as you mentioned, with Game 4 coming up a little bit later on tonight on TNT. But perhaps the biggest news out of all this is Pops Halliburton is going to be allowed back in attendance starting with tonight's game. He will not be allowed courtside. He will have a suite seat, so he can't go get in Jalen Brunson's face or something after the game if Halliburton hits another game winner. I figured he was going to be suspended for the rest of the postseason, but I guess the powers that be in both the NBA and the Pacers organization had a change of heart and said, all right, Tyrese, we'll let your dad back in the building.
Yeah, and then I was listening to the post-game TNT broadcast after, I think it was like Game 1 or Game 2 in New York, and you hear Tyrese talking with it. I think it was like Shaq or something after the game. And he's like, yeah, free my dad till it's backwards. So, look, I think the powers of Tyrese being like, all right, he's forgiven. Let's let him back, but obviously put him where he's no longer courtside. He gets to be in a suite. So that's actually probably better, honestly. He gets to enjoy the game from afar. And, honestly, look, I'm glad that he's going to be able to go watch his son play in person again. I feel like the punishment went out for long enough because that happened, in round 1, right, against the Bucks?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so good to see him back. And, hopefully we'll see what happens. But hopefully Tyrese can continue to play the way he has been.
Game 2 coming up tonight. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Jack, we'll see you then.
Yeah, see you then, man.
All right, hour number 1 in the books. The Extra Point coming up next. Gamecock Club Hour presented by Cranes Cooling Heating here on the game. Tyler Ed once again telling you about our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. If you look outside, it's raining, or it has been raining here in and around the Midlands overnight and yesterday as well. And if you have an open crawl space under your home and recently experienced a storm, you might have some standing water under there. The high humidity and condensation can create all sorts of problems like mold, mildew, termites can get in there. It can even affect the air that you breathe in your home, because about half the air that you and your family breathe within your home comes from that crawl space. That's where our friends at Canty Foundation Specialists come in. Go online to schedule an appointment today at cantycanfix.com. They'll send a professional out to your home to evaluate your foundation issues and get them fixed right so you and your family can live without worry going forward. Again, go online to schedule an appointment today at cantycanfix.com for our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist. It's 10 o'clock. Welcome back in. Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler Head and Chris Clark along with you here. Happy Tuesday. Hopefully you enjoyed the long weekend. I keep wanting to say it's Monday, but it's not. It's a short week here. As I brought up to Jack as well, we'll be in June by the end of the week. Believe it or not, time flying. 96 days to kick off. A lot happening. How's your weekend?
It was fantastic. Got to spend some time with family, friends, and kind of gear up. I mean, you mentioned June, Tyler. Whew, it's going to be, Shane Beamer was talking about that somewhat recently. It's going to be, I mean, I'm not going to pretend to be as busy as South Carolina's coaching staff or anything, but it's going to be pretty busy. Got official visits, got camps, got summer workouts starting. So, I mean, 3 months or so, football season's going to be here. So a lot of team like preparation stuff, a lot of recruiting. You know, we've been kind of eyeing this summer, knowing it was going to be significant from a recruiting standpoint, and that's certainly going to be the case. So, you know, first big recruiting weekend coming up, starting Friday. Going to be some guys, you know, coming on campus. So,
is May a dead period?
No, guys can come on right now. There's some little dead periods. I don't have the calendar in front of me. There's some little, you know, spots in between, but, you know, OVs can start up here at the end of the month. Some schools had official visits back in April too.
Okay.
But South Carolina has not done that. I don't want to say they've never done it, but off the top of my head, I can't think of any that have really done, you know, spring official visits. They kind of table those until the summer, and so we knew this was going to be, you know, it's going to start up here soon, and it's going to be pretty wild. But to answer your question, I actually just looked it up to make sure. So it's a dead period right now, but only the 25th through the 28th.
Okay.
So just like I said, like a 3-day dead period sprinkled in there. But, you know, the contact period is mixed with an eval period from about mid-April until May 24th. And so, you know, that means coaches can go on the road, do some evals, meet with guys. Guys can come on campus. Obviously, that was, you know, back in the spring when they were having practice, spring game, et cetera, and then into May as well. But right now, at least for the next few days, not going to be any guys coming on campus. But that'll change starting on Friday.
Well, our focus will shift primarily to football, certainly within the next coming days, as unfortunately over the weekend, South Carolina softball's fun season did come to an end. Tough series against UCLA. As I put it to Jack, 21 total innings. You outplayed them for 13. Unfortunately, the 8 innings that UCLA got the best of you was the only 8th they needed between the 7th inning on Saturday and the 7th inning on Saturday and the 7 innings following on Sunday, enough for them to escape with the series victory and get back to their unprecedented 33rd College World Series trip.
Well, it was great. You got to play it in Columbia. You know, we talked about that a lot. UCLA and South Carolina were, I don't want to say the two teams, but certainly in a very small group. They were on the short list of, hey, who can grab that last 8 seed to be a, you know, super regional host, assuming they make it through the regionals, which obviously both did. And, you know, to not have to go to California, I think was significant. Great for the fans. I mean, the crowds are great. Saw Wes on TV.
Did you?
By the way, yes.
Which game?
Game 3, I saw him.
Okay.
He might have been at some of the other ones too, but saw him at Game 3 several times actually. He was chilling, kind of down the third baseline.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, looking cool. So he was out there enjoying the game. And look, as Ashley Chastain Woodard said after the game, you know, you're going to think for a long time about how close you were, especially with how it happened. It was an incredibly close series. Both teams had a game where they outplayed the other team for pretty much the entire game. Game 1 for South Carolina, Game 3 for UCLA. And, you know, Wes last week, I think we all picked it to be a 3-game series. And Wes was very confident this thing's going to 3. And it's 2 really good teams, 2 very evenly matched teams. Obviously, 2 of the top teams in the country this year. And I will say, I'm not normally one for hyperbole. I'm not normally one where you say, that's it, you lost your chance. You know, I don't typically go that far, but when that ball that Jordan Woolery hit out in the bottom 7th of Game 2, when that happened, I'll admit I was like, that might have been it. You know, because now you got to think about going and beating a really good UCLA team again. I think Ashley Chastain Woodard has done a great job with her team from a mental standpoint. That was covered in the broadcast on Game 3. You know, thinking about Sam Gress, right, who's been around the game for so long, has been such a great leader, the heartbeat of this team, coming in for that situation. You unfortunately give up the homer, and then, like, trying to come back for that, right?
Yeah.
And South Carolina was game for it in Game 3. I think they just got outplayed in that game. And so, you know, when you play a good team like UCLA, everybody at this stage is good. If you're playing in a super regional, you're really, really good. You didn't get there by fluke, and neither of those teams did. So when you had the opportunity to end it and end it in 2 games and not have to worry about a Game 3, you know, it was an opportunity you needed to take. And to be clear, that wasn't the only, obviously, play that was made in Game 2 or throughout the weekend that,
Sure,
you know, could have prevented South. That was the last play. And so that's one you think about. But you had a new opportunity. The next day, Ashley Chastain Woodard pointed out even in Game 2, they had some opportunities where they could have built up a cushion or prevented UCLA. You know, you give up a walk to lead off the inning. So tough go. But, man, what a special group, and what they did, especially relative to the expectations coming in, was tremendous.
Yeah, and look, momentum's a very real thing in all sports, and especially with one like softball, for a program like UCLA that's been there and done that so many times. Again, they came in having gone to 3 of the last 4, College World Series, and you have a team outside of the freshmen, obviously, that are experienced going this deep into the tournament. And for South Carolina, outside of Quincy Lelio, who was at Oklahoma prior to being here, none of them have ever been this deep in this thing. You know what I mean? And that's not the reason why you lost necessarily, but UCLA didn't panic, right? They knew they had the talent. They knew they had been in these situations before. And once that momentum flipped, it was all on their side. And again, they proceeded to handle things pretty easily on Sunday with the 5-0 win to close things out. And, you know, as much as it sucks right now and stings, because again, we're only 48-ish hours removed, or not even that, from losing the series and ending the season. I think whenever Carolina does make it back to Oklahoma City, whether it be next year, 2 years out from now, whenever, and we have a lot of confidence they're going to be able to do that, I feel like that'll make that moment a little bit sweeter, because you did come so close and get your heart broke, to where when it does eventually happen, and again, we have a lot of confidence that it will, I think everybody's going to have even more of an appreciation for it, because the chase to get there was a little bit longer.
Yeah, and it's tough to do, and we've talked about this before. I mean, Texas A&M was the number 1 overall seed and I won't say they got sent home. They got to stay home and not play in their own regional and not play in their own super regional, right? Liberty, beat them, upset them. And so it's extremely tough, to get to that stage. And it is difficult just because, if UCLA had come out and won it in 2 games, or even if UCLA had won it in 3 games, and they were, 7-0 and 5-0 like Game 3 was, like yes, you'd be incredibly disappointed. But I think the part that's tough is you had it right there. In Game 2, you look back at that when you had it. And again, the last pitch of the game was not, that ended the game, but that was not the only play throughout the course of that game that could have gone the other way. But you're right. I think Wes said it well on social after the game. This is a team where, like, this isn't the final product. This is year 1.
Yep.
Which is hard to, that's as easy to forget, like, because this team's been so good and because they do have a veteran presence. Like, this might just be the start. And I do think it'll be important to keep things in context. Next year, they're going to lose some of these players who were veterans and integral to the team. In some ways you may not have. We'll see what happens, in the portal and development and all that. I'm very confident that Ashley Chastain Woodard, her staff, will do a really good job with that. But you do have to keep in mind, kind of like the football program, one of the reasons they were a tough out, they were so experienced, and that's what this team had. So it was a special group. I think even in Game 3, Tyler, I mean, late in the game, what was it, the 6th inning? I mean, you missed 2-run homers that would have tied it by a couple feet.
Barely.
Rhodey and Winters? I think that was it. The first one was, when it was hit, I was like, that might be out, about to the wall. And then the next one was even farther, and they just didn't go. And you never know, if that game gets tied, what happens from there. just a really, really closely played series. You hate it that, they're not going to get that opportunity to go play in Oklahoma City because this is a group that I think, frankly, deserved it.
Well, and there's so many neat stories on this team, and I think Sam Gress is among one of the best. And again, she's the 6th year. This was her final year and was doing such a phenomenal job. Gets to come back in the game on Saturday to relieve Jory Hurd after, kind of got into a little bit of a sticky situation there at the bottom of the 7th. One pitch. That was it. And again, if it goes an inch higher, it's a pop-up. If it's an inch lower, it's a grounder, and they're throwing to first base and going to OKC that way. But just the stars aligned in the right way for UCLA and the wrong way for South Carolina. And unfortunately, ball travels over the fence for Woolery, and that ends the thing. But, again, went a whole lot farther than anybody expected this program to get this year. Something to build off of. Chastain Woodard talked about it over the weekend that you had a lot of visitors of, transfer or potential transfers there. They got to experience Beckham Field, the crowd, the energy, and what it would look like hosting a super regional that is a very easy sell in my head, that saying, hey, look what we did in year number 1 when everybody picked us to be dead last in the SEC. Nobody gave us a chance. You come here, this is what you can expect to do going forward. Now, again, you still got to go out there and do it. And, if anybody was taking you lightly this year, they're not going to take you lightly next year. But an emphatic statement made in her first year as the head coach here at South Carolina. And it's even more special when it's an alumni, obviously. And you heard Coach Chastain Woodard's emotion after the game on Sunday for how devastating it was to come up short. But, again, this is just the beginning of what hopefully this program is going to be for a long time to come.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this isn't year 5, year 6, where you look at, okay, this is the culmination of everything that's been happening. And obviously a ton of work, and the roster construction where you've brought in transfers. Quincy Lilio came from a huge program, as you said, but a lot of Charlotte transfers. You've got a Longwood transfer. Like, you've got, and maybe that's why South Carolina was picked last. A lot of people looked and said, okay, Charlotte players, yeah, okay, cool. But bringing back players from the past roster that have continued to develop, transfers, young players, veteran players, and just kind of melding it together into the group that we saw. So, that is the good news. The bad news is that some of them won't be around. The good news is that this is just the start. And as you said, it's a great foundation. You've now given the fans a taste, to where, okay, this program is now validated as this is what Ashley Chastain Woodard can do. They're going to have, I think, a lot of support going forward from the fans, which is great. And, there were recruits there. You got kind of a different type of recruiting calendar where players can come in during the supers, during the regionals. And so definitely a great story to sell for them.
Certainly so. We'll get back into more of that, get Wes's thoughts coming up at the top of the 11 o'clock hour, and see if he knew he was on TV, at least in game number 3. But a lot of things happening in the football world as well. Spring meetings going on this week out in Destin, Florida. Greg Sanking's talking, and he's not being shy about his opinions on things. We'll dive into some of that coming up next. It is the Extra Point, the Gamecock Club Hour, presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler and Chris with you on your Tuesday here on the Game.
All right, folks, one of our great partners here on the Game, as always, our friends over at Integrated Media. Summertime's here, so maybe you're hanging out outdoors more. If you have a patio, if you're putting together plans for a patio, maybe a little outdoor man cave, maybe a guest house, maybe you got a screen porch and you want to trick it out, outfit it a little bit more so you can enjoy the great outdoors while you're still keeping up with all of the sports action or just streaming. You can do that with our friends over at Integrated Media. Now, they can do everything, every single part of the process for you. Sourcing the equipment, televisions, sound bars, wireless speakers, making sure your internet setup is great throughout your home and around your home if you're streaming outside. They can do it for you. IntegratedMediaInc.com, 803-948-8327. They are a true one-stop shop for all your tech needs. They've been to my home. They've been to Wes's. Let them come to yours. 803-948-8327.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler Head and Chris Clark along with you on your Tuesday here on the game. Coming up on Thursday, Schroeder's Towing Roadshow heads out to Firehouse Subs 2184 West Cab Street out in Camden. Three of us will be out there hanging out from 9 until noon. Come by and see us and grab some subs and just hang out. I had a delicious Firehouse sub on Saturday, actually.
What'd you go with this time?
I went with the brisket, add bacon, of course.
Wow.
A little bit of hot sauce on there as well. Never a bad choice.
It's a good one. What about the wifey? Did she partake with you?
She did. We went in Lexington. We have the Old Mill Pond Trail. We like to go walk out when the weather's nice and walking around. It's middle of the day. Hey, what do you want to eat after this? And I've got her hooked on Firehouse Subs now because she suggested it herself. She's like, you want to go to Firehouse Subs? I'm like, of course I do.
Did you notice also the pun there, hooked on, like hook and ladder?
I didn't even mean to do that.
Did she get the spicy Cajun chicken?
She did. That is her go-to.
those are both so good. And now I will say, if I can make a recommendation, stretch out a little bit. Like try. I know you. I mean, you've had almost everything.
I think I've had everything on the menu at least once. Because we are thankful for those patrons at the Firehouse Subs that allow us to sample a little bit of everything. So I think I've tried everything at least once.
Okay. I mean, the spicy Cajun chicken is you can tell her has rapidly moved up my power ranking.
Now she did try the hot ones sub a while back.
Yeah, you said she handled it
she handled it well.
That's amazing.
And she does spice way better than I do. So she handled it well, but her go-to is the Cajun chicken.
That's a good one. I'm hungry now.
Yeah, hey, 2 more days we'll be out there. Don't worry.
We might. I don't know if I can wait that long, but we'll see.
Well, I mean, you can always. There's 15 locations here in the Midlands, so you can go whenever you want.
That's right.
Don't let me stop you. But yeah, we'll be out there on Thursday. Come on and see us hang out there in the Camden location this week. 96 days until kickoff for South Carolina football against Virginia Tech in Atlanta. So 95 days until most SEC programs play. As we get to the end of the month of May, spring meetings going on in Destin, Florida. And gosh, is there ever been a year where more's on the table in terms of things to discuss, important things that is, than what we have this year when it comes to the SEC and college football as a whole?
There's kind of is it a Cold War going on between the SEC, Big Ten, and the other Power Four conferences, and then the Group of Five is kind of, hey guys, we're still here too, kind of. We'd like a piece.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah,
because it's a lot of talking, a lot of hypotheticals, a lot of this could happen, that could happen. You're hoping nobody shoots one across the bow at any point, and this turns into an all-out war, but tensions are rising. I'll say that much.
Yeah, they are. I mean, Greg Sankey, he did throw a couple of darts, during his recent comments, and a couple that come to mind. I mean, for one, he came out and admitted that some people who are a part of the SEC conversations are saying, why are we still in the NCAA again?
Yep.
And so that was interesting, just that he publicly brought that up. And then number two, obviously, when it comes to the playoff format, he took a shot at the ACC and the Big 12. One of the Big 12, I guess PR people, for lack of a better term, certainly has a better title than that. And, I'm kind of oversimplifying it. Basically said that's not what we said.
Yeah.
And for context, Sankey basically, said, hey, I'm trying to move the sport forward. We're not doing press releases about the good of the game and all that kind of stuff. But there is certainly a power play on the part of the SEC and the Big Ten, who are considered, rightfully so, the two most important conferences, in trying to grab more power in the structure of college football, and particularly the college football playoff.
And I think I was going back and forth with some folks on Twitter because yesterday is when Greg Sankey was speaking to the media, and you had Dellinger and McMurphy and all these people tweeting out his quotes, and people were obviously giving their takes on it. I think we have to remember something. Greg Sankey's job is to make the SEC as profitable as possible, make as much money for the member institutions, mainly off the TV deal. That's his job. That's what he's hired for. That's why he gets paid a lot of money to do that. And he does a very good job at that. His job is not to make college football as a whole better. It's to look out for the best interest of his conference. And I think that's where people get a little, offended with some of the comments that he makes. Taking shots at other conferences, talking about, expanding the playoffs and AQs and all those kind of things that, yeah, I would say are not in the best interest of college football as a whole from a fan experience standpoint, but that's not what Greg Sankey gets paid to do. He gets paid to make SEC schools a lot of money, which is what he's doing and will continue to do going forward. Unfortunately, you're going to have some things in college football that people aren't going to love in the process of that happening.
Well, I've publicly said my piece many times about Greg Sankey, and it mainly relates to, like officiating, right? Like that's my biggest gripe. Gaslighting fans by saying fans want perfection when it comes to officiating, and gaslighting with like NIL related matters. Like those things irritate me.
Sure.
I don't understand why officiating can't be better in the SEC. I don't understand why they're in a protected class above and beyond coaches or student athletes. Like I have a lot of qualms with that. I mean, I agree with you that if you just look at the results, like who's at the helm, it does seem like the SEC is doing quite well for itself. I think if we were really to dive into it, is that because it's the SEC, or how much credit do you give to Greg Sankey? I don't pretend to know the answer to that. Maybe you have some thoughts, Tyler. I mean, it's probably some of both, right? But I do think not fumbling the bag here, so to speak, like we've seen some commissioners do at other conferences with various things.
For conferences that don't exist anymore.
Yes. That's important. And when you have this position of power, when you are at the top, as the SEC and the Big Ten are with college football, you have to make sure you don't fumble the bag. You have to make sure that you keep it that way. And so they're both positioned quite well because of their member institutions, because of the TV deals. And so now you're trying to see them do things like, let's take the vote from 65% to 68%, right?
Yep.
So that we can, make sure that we keep a stronghold on this thing. Let's make sure that we find a format that gets us both 4 automatic qualifiers plus the chance of more at-larges in the future. And then let's make sure that we're stumping to create the, I say illusion, but just create an atmosphere in which SEC and Big Ten schools are thought of as, hey, if there's 3 at-large bids, those schools should get them because they're in the SEC and Big Ten.
Sure.
So that's what it's about at this point.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you bring up because I think Sankey's been at the helm of the SEC since 2015, if I remember correctly. So right at a decade now, he was handed the keys to a Ferrari, right? Like this thing was already impressive and expensive and all that kind of stuff when he took it over. He's just been at the helm as it's continued to grow, or in the sense of a car get faster and all those kind of things. So yeah, he didn't obviously build it from the ground up, but he's done a really good job of A, keeping it on track, and B, continuing to help it grow. And when you kind of look at the ways the SEC can continue to make more money, continue to grow, having more power to yield a potential playoff that benefits them in the Big Ten the most is obviously going to put more money in their pockets. And there's the fear on the other side from the ACC and the Big 12 and the Group of 5 that, hey, if we don't allow them this power that they want, they're going to go away and do their own thing, and we're going to be stuck adrift in the ocean without any help. So it's they know where the power is, right? And Sankey and Petiti with the Big Ten know the leverage that they have. And again, I hate that we have to talk so much about this instead of the stuff that's happening on the field, but that's just where college sports are now, unfortunately.
Yeah, and you make a good point on the smaller of the two, the little brothers of the Power Four. They're kind of stuck between trying to fight, but also recognizing that you're in some ways fighting an uphill battle, a losing battle.
Yep.
And so now you have things like the compromise that we were talking about in the college football playoff, where it's straight seeding.
Yep.
In theory, the ACC and Big 12 should not like that and don't like it, in fact. But on the other hand, they get the compromise of, well, your payout's going to be the same at least next year, and they go, okay, we'll take it.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of stuck there. So I think hanging on is probably a good strategy for them in some ways.
We'll keep this conversation going on the other side. Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooley Heating. Tyler and Chris on your Tuesday on the Game.
All right, everyone, let me tell you about our friends over at Classic Roofing. Joe Reeder, Max Sawyer, ClassicRoofingSC.com. Residential and commercial roofers serving Columbia, South Carolina, and the surrounding areas in the Midlands. If you're looking for a reliable local company to handle your roof inspections, roof installations, roof replacements, and roof repairs, plus anything else that relates to a roof for your home or your business. Make sure you reach out to them. 803-590-7870. Free estimate, no obligation, at classicroofingsc.com. Joe and Mac have families that live right here in the Midlands. They're GAF certified roofers. Only about 7% of roofers nationwide have that certification. You can build your new roof online with the GAF virtual design tool to visualize what your roof may look like. And again, get a free estimate. ClassicRoofingSC.com or 590-7870.
Welcome back in. It is the extra. There I go again. It is the Gamecock Club Hour, presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. We need to get like a jar for every time I mess up
Yeah.
a show name to put like $1 in.
We'll donate it to charity.
Yeah, I'll go broke very quickly. I can go ahead and assure you of that. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler and Chris along with you here, discussing the early days of the SEC spring meetings out there in Destin. Greg Sankey addressing the media yesterday, talking about a range of topics of everything going on around the sport of college football. And we aren't going to have time to dive into all of it today. We can get to some more of it tomorrow and certainly as the week goes along because there's a lot to unpack here. But I want to kind of focus on the overarchingness of Greg Sankey's presence within college sports right now. Where, again, I said a moment ago, his job is to make SEC institutions a lot of money, which he's doing a very good job of that because they've never been more profitable. TV deals are huge and looking to expand more and more as time goes along. But at the same time, for those that say, well, college sports is being ruined for me, Greg Sankey could also qualify as one of those people that is, quote-unquote, ruining college sports because of the changes being made, because the SEC and the Big Ten have so much power. That word ruin gets thrown around a lot, though. Mm-hmm. And our guy Josh Pate of the Josh Pate College Football Show was having this discussion on his show the other day, and he brings up an interesting point that college football's not truly ruined until Saturdays start to feel a little bit different. And here's what he had to say.
There's Ohio State. Let's say Michigan's in town. And let's say it's midway through the third quarter and they're deadlocked at 17 and it's 4th and 1 on your own 38-yard line and they're opting to go for it. The clock's ticking down, huddle breaks, 5, 4, 3, crowds at full throat. Just pause right there. Is anybody thinking about whether Ohio State had OTA workouts? Is anybody thinking about how much the left tackle's making? You're not. So the point is, the game hasn't really been ruined at all. If that moment feels different, if that moment is ruined, then college football has ruined itself. Does Saturday still feel like Saturday in the fall? Because that's really the great barometer. So my answer is yes, Saturday still feels like Saturday. I think college football is extremely resilient. Like, it is extremely strong. It's the redwood. You could chop a redwood down, but you don't do it with 5 or 10 swings. It'd take a lot to chop down a redwood, all concentrated, all at one spot on that tree. And don't do it because you'll get arrested. But point being, it takes a lot to ruin college football. That's a byproduct of how great it is.
And he brings up a lot of good points there. And I would say myself, when I'm sitting in Williams-Brice Stadium watching these games on Saturday and, you know, you got a crazy game coming down the wire against LSU or something along those lines, I'm not thinking about NIL or the transfer portal or the things that are the negatives of college football as of right now in a lot of ways. Saturdays do feel roughly the same. There is a line, though. We can get to the point where Saturdays do start to feel different because of all these negative effects. And like you said, it's like chopping down redwood. It's not one strike and the thing falls over. It has to be chipped away steadily over time. You wonder, though, how long it's going to take for something like that to happen that would cause a lot of people to turn away from the sport, which would, in turn, start affecting that bottom line of conferences like the SEC and the Big Ten.
One thing I think you see on a micro scale, to use his analogy about the left tackle and, you know, before a 4th and 1, not thinking about what the left tackle makes. If your left tackle gets beat on a play,
yeah.
Now you have
about it, like, we're paying this guy $700,000 to miss
$2 million. You know what? Oh, we shouldn't have given the freshman who's never played $2 million. Whatever.
It is starting to trickle in a little bit.
It comes in a little bit,
especially with how high value some of these deals are.
That's right.
Like, all right, hey, if Sellers throws an interception, this guy's getting paid $1.5 million. He's not supposed to do that.
But the reason I say micro is anybody not watching because of that? If anything, it's making people maybe more invested.
Not yet.
Not yet. So my question is, what are the other things that would have to happen? And so let me give you 2 quick things. Not to get political. We don't do that on this program. Remember when nobody was going to watch the NFL anymore?
Yeah, a few times.
Whoops. That didn't happen, right?
Yeah, record-setting numbers.
So every year.
Yeah.
Every year, some new league comes along, really in most sports, but football, they've tried it. Which one's going now? What is it nowadays?
The
USFL? UFL, excuse me.
Yep.
No S.
They can join the USFL and the XFL to make the UFL.
Okay, so now it's the UFL. Nobody's watching that.
Not really.
I mean, like, if you look, and nobody likes that or nobody watches that guy, but, like, that's as close as I'll get. Like, they're not big crowds. It's not going to beat the NFL. It's not going to even come close.
Yeah.
And so we don't have, heck, maybe one day we'll get some, in some weird universe, like an alternate college athletic. I don't know. But there's no competition to college sports. And it's so established I mean, how many Gamecock fans you talk to? I've been to every game since 1980. My grandpa, you just hear it's so ingrained. I just think it's going to be tough. I mean, what types of things, can anything even happen to where people are going to say, I'm out on this? I mean, I really don't know. I mean, are we watching the games and there's even more TV timeouts, or is it, okay, I don't want, a player, every time a player throws a pass that's sponsored by somebody. I mean, I can't even come up with what would create a universe in which people aren't going to watch college football anymore.
And you bring up a good point. I want to keep this conversation going on the other side because I want to have enough time to kind of expand on this thought and get your thoughts as well, because I almost feel like, in a way, college sports is kind of bulletproof. And I'll tell you why coming up next. Gamecock Club Hour, presented by Krantz Cooling Heating. Tyler and Chris on your Tuesday here on The Game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. It's Tyler and Chris along with you for a few more minutes here before Wes jumps in at the top of the 11 o'clock hour, and we'll get back into the softball discussion. We are discussing a lot of the conversation around the SEC spring meetings this week. Greg Sankey talked at length yesterday about a number of things that, again, we can hit more specifically as the week goes along, but we're kind of talking about this overarching thought of college sports being ruined and the field not being the same for people and all those kind of things. And, you know, you kind of brought up what ties people to the sport. And I think in a way that's where it's bulletproof, because you're a Panthers fan, right?
Yes.
Unfortunately. Yeah, it's not great right now. Your connection to the Panthers is that proximity-wise, they're the closest NFL team to you, right? Like, you feel like they represent you better than any NFL team because they're 90 minutes up the road.
Yep.
So when the Panthers aren't playing great, it's not that hard to disconnect from them because outside of that proximity, not a whole lot of deep ties to them. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right.
South Carolina, you went there. You went there for 4 years, paid a lot of money to go there, have memories all around the campus, going to Willie B, going to Beckham Field, Founders Park, whatever it may be. You are ingrained within South Carolina athletics. Obviously, you work in it now, but I'm trying to present it as if you were just an average student that wasn't working in sports. So your connection is so deep. And like you said, there are people, hey, my grandfather went there, my dad went there, I went there. Like, I've been going to games since I was a little kid. Your connection to college sports is so deep. And I know, look, people throw out threats all the time on social media. I'm done. I'm quitting. I'm never watching again. All right, see you next week. I don't think we can pull away from college sports as easily as we think we can because we have such deep ties to it that we don't have in other areas of sports.
Well, and I think even like, so for me, like the Panthers, it's easier for me. It probably depends on the person. It's easier for me to disconnect because while I call myself a fan, I don't care that much.
Yes.
You know, I'm not like, an Eagles fan or something.
And look, there are plenty of diehards live and dies for pro teams as well.
Especially in places where there's not college football.
Yes.
Right? Like,
yes.
And sorry to, Temple, and use Philly. But places, I mean, that's talked about often here. There's not a quote-unquote pro team. Yeah, the Panthers, but they're in Charlotte. They're not here in South Carolina. I adopted the Panthers because I grew up watching the NFL, but I had not adopted a team. So when they became an expansion franchise in, 95 or whenever that was, my uncle really liked them, hung out with my uncle a lot. We adopted the Panthers.
They did technically play in South Carolina for a couple of years.
Right, they did.
So.
They did. So there were some reasons, but
sure.
When you attend a school and maybe you meet your wife there, like I did,
yep.
Things like that, like family ties. Like you may say, well, I'm a you wouldn't say I'm a Panthers fan. I'm an Eagles fan since I use them. I'm an Eagles fan, and 5 generations of my family have been Eagles fans. Okay, but it's just a little different with college sports, and I think that's why some people have been so frustrated, disenchanted with the portal era, is because one of the things about college football is you look around and go, these are young men, who are kind of in that stage of development. It's a more pure form of the game. They're not professional athletes. They're not being paid. You're playing for the name on the front of the jersey. There's that pageantry of college sports. And so some people fear losing that, which there's some valid reasons to think some of that is being lost,
yep.
right? But the problem is, it's not really a problem. It's just a reality. It's still really dang entertaining.
It is.
And
yep.
you still do have that attachment to that team where you go, oof, all right, I don't like this part, but Lenore Sellers, he's good. I like watching him. And so
sure,
you just
sure.
you have that connection to the school. So it just kind of continues, and I think people just eventually roll with the changes.
And to have a profound effect that would get the attention of Sankey, of Petiti, of the powers that be in college football, it would require people to turn off in droves. If, because the national championship game had 30 million people or something like that watching it this past year. If that number gets cut down to 12 next year, then you've got their attention. But I don't see that happening. And it could be a gradual process to where in 10 years saying, oh my God, look at that. A fourth of the people are watching college football now compared to 10 years ago. I just don't truly believe that many people, especially younger people, because, a lot of people that can, have an issue with the way college sports is going are people that have been around the game or followed the game for decades and decades that are in that older demographic that, not to offend anyone here, isn't as valuable to TV executives as that 18 to 34. Because that's what's going to be watching TV and sports for the next 40, 50, 60 years, that they're more focused on when it comes to building their audience. They understand the older people are going to tune out to some degree, but as long as they still got that younger crowd hooked, then they're good. And that's what their focus is.
Also wonder, I haven't really thought about this angle. I wonder if some of the executives and administrators, like a Greg Sankey, they say a lot of things about the portal that I actually don't agree with, the portal, NIL. Are they actually secretly rubbing their hands together going, this is amazing, right? Because, we see that, like with On3, early On3 adopted, we're going to cover the NIL and transfer portal. We're going to cover the heck out of it.
Yep.
We think people are going to read it. People complain to us about it, and I'm like, the numbers show that y'all are devouring this content.
Yes.
And so portal has completely replaced high school recruiting as like the area of emphasis. The smart administrators would probably lean in and go, this is a big opportunity to, like you said, capture the younger demographic and people who are just interested in it.
I think there's something to people that enjoy hate reading, right? If you see a political post about something that you don't agree with, what do? You go to the comments, and either you're going to put something in there or read what other people say going against that. Like, I don't know what that phenomenon is, but people like to, take in content of things they don't agree with or don't like. I don't know why that is, but it's a thing. And again, the numbers back it up.
It's true.
So, good discussion. We'll get Wes in here for the 11 o'clock hour, talk some Gamecock baseball, and dive back into some football stuff, reset some stuff we talked about with Mike Furry as well on Friday. It has been the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating here on your Tuesday on the Game.
All right, everyone, let me tell you about the presenting sponsor of the Gamecock Club Hour on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So friends over at Krantz Cooling and Heating, it's been so nice as it's warmed up, hanging out in the garage sometimes, cleaning up, doing some things, working out there. Got the mini split in the Clark garage, courtesy of our friends over at Krantz Cooling and Heating. Justin Krantz, the general manager there, and their team do a great job. Such a great job, in fact. I've had them out to my home several times. Like I said, they put my mini split in when my family moved to Irmo a while back. My mom said, hey, you need a mini split? Hit up the folks at Krantz Cooling and Heating. They did just that. They put in 2 for them. They're thrilled with them. 803-672-3224. Check out tons of 5-star Google reviews. Schedule an appointment. Reach out to their team. Since 1983, Krantz Cooling, that's Krantz, coolingwithak.com.
11 o'clock, welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler and Chris still along with you. Wes Mitchell joining us now as we kick off the 11 o'clock hour. Wes, were you aware you were a TV star over the weekend taking in Gamecock softball? According to Chris, he caught you on TV. How many times? 2 or 3?
On there several times.
Several times.
Yeah.
You were just, the camera loved you, Wes. They couldn't get enough of you.
Yeah, I actually got several texts about that. I had great seats, was on the front row, and it is funny if you're at a certain angle. I guess it was the camera all the way across because we were on third base side. The camera on the first base side looking across the field. If you're just right at that perfect angle, you'll just get caught in there. So I was like, all right, I already knew people had told me. I was like, let me make sure I don't say anything, because you never know.
True.
What you're going to get caught doing or saying and then be a meme.
Don't get caught saying anything. Don't get caught picking your nose when you're sitting in those seats. You'd have to live with that one forever. So I think you came away unscathed.
So far, yeah, I have not received any text, any photos, any videos of me, embarrassing myself. So I think we're good.
Here's the only bone I have to pick, Tyler. Maybe
Okay.
you're with me. Thanks for the invite, Wes. Appreciate that.
Doing things, Chris.
True. I might have reconsidered, though, had I had a third base line view of the game.
Well, I guess the question is, how tough were the tickets to get? I know they sold out pretty quickly.
Yeah, they actually shout out to one of our Gamecock Central subscribers. He had a booklet and could not go. And so he ended up hooking me up. And then once you get there, it's actually, other than a few reserved seats for like family, it's kind of first come, first serve. So another reason we always tell people to go check out South Carolina softball. You go get there early enough, you go right in there, and basically be right on top of the field and watch from a great view. So that was cool to just check all that out.
Yeah, it looked like a great environment. And, we were talking about this last hour, Wes. I mean, the foundation that's been laid now for this program, very quick. Ashley Chastain Woodard and her team, they came out of the gate strong. They're sitting there picked last in the SEC, and all they do is come out, just a 20-0 start, no biggie, and then end up just being right on the doorstep of Oklahoma City in year one. And as disappointing as that is, to just miss out and to have it right there, devastating, no doubt. But then you kind of go back and look in a relative sense what they accomplished. Accomplishing that really in any year is strong, right? But to do it in 1 year is outstanding. And you've kind of seen the interest in the sport and the interest in Gamecock softball just continue to grow. You saw the crowd there. And that really, I think, has laid the foundation to where those crowds probably going to be, not saying it'll be a super regional type crowd every week, but there's going to be a lot of interest in this program, I think, going forward because of what they've done and just kind of how they've gone about things as well.
Yeah, if you're actually Chastain Woodard, if you're the staff, you are certainly hoping, and I think this is the case, that people in Columbia have maybe caught the softball bug a little bit. That's the thing, going to a couple of the games in the regional and then the one of the open practices and then the Sunday game in the Super, you really are just struck when you watch it up close in person at how quick the ball moves around, how strong some of these arms are, how hard the ball is hit. And, I think it's a situation where you don't really necessarily appreciate it till you really sit down and watch it. And, there was a high quality of softball, both in the regional. I think we talked about this at the time, like even this sort of quote unquote smaller schools that came in, very high quality, like very high skill. And then of course you're talking about UCLA, one of the best programs of all time coming in, and South Carolina really going toe to toe with them. It's one of those things where, some years there will be some argument about, hey, was this a successful year? Was this not a successful year? By any measure you could possibly build, at least based on the preseason expectations, there would be no argument in the world that this was not a successful first season for Chastain Woodard and that staff. Obviously, you feel for everybody in the program, because whenever you're a competitor and you can taste kind of it's the the equivalent of making the college football playoff in football, going to Omaha in baseball. I would say probably about like going to the Final Four in basketball, men's or women's. If you can taste it and it's right there, and then it is taken away from you, unfortunately, that's something where I feel like many of these girls will probably feel that sting. I mean, years from now, frankly, like you're always, probably the rest of your life, you're going to think about it. But I do think in time they will realize, and hopefully they already have, that they have very much laid a foundation. And I think, just kind of, just set a standard, I think, is the important thing for the future of this program.
And that's the thing to look back on from this weekend. Is such an interesting series, because it wasn't like, UCLA comes in and just sweeps the first two games and that's it. You went out there, pretty much dominated them on Friday, got out to the early lead, and didn't allow them to claw back in the game, and controlled most of Saturday's game as well. It's that last inning, things obviously come apart. They score the 4 runs, walk-off home run by Woolery to win the game and push it to a game number 3, where, again, you were 1 out away from moving on to Oklahoma City. And then, momentum had obviously shifted over into their favor, coming away from that, and you just didn't have it on Sunday. They beat you 5-0, and obviously go on to their 33rd, and I believe that's the most ever for any program going to the Women's College World Series for UCLA. So like you said, it's going to sting for a long time, and for the girls like Sam Gress, who aren't going to get another year next year, that's going to burn even more. She was obviously the one pitching that one pitch that did go over the fence on Saturday that ended things. That's not the only reason why they lost that game. There's a lot of factors that went into it up to that point, but it's something that you're going to have to deal with this offseason. Obviously, it's going to sting until next year rolls around, but again, I'd say for most people, because under Bev Smith, this team program was routinely making regionals. They just weren't getting out of regionals. So I'd say once you won the Columbia Regional the other weekend, you exceeded a lot of people's expectations for what your number one was supposed to be. And to be in a position 1 out away from making a trip to the College World Series for the first time in 30 years was way farther than anybody thought this program was going to be. So you far exceeded expectations in your number one, and this is what you have to build off of going forward now.
Well, and I think it's going to be, Wes, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this. I kind of feel like one of the reasons that this team was so good, and there are many of them, was you did have just a really well-constructed group on the field and in the dugout, right? Like you could just tell the culture was very strong. They're obviously talented. You can't go that far if you're not talented, but they had a very good mix, and probably one of the reasons that I think people were doing some stargazing with this team, to use a football recruiting term, where before the season you look at it, you go, okay, this team they were decent last year. Ashley Chastain Woodard's adding, a Longwood transfer from Oklahoma, and a bunch of Charlotte transfers for the most part. Let's give them last, and they came out and showed that, when you construct in a smart fashion a roster that is very experienced, you can do some things, and they are, to your point, Tyler, going to lose some of those for next year and going to have some tough players to replace. But Wes, I mean, your thoughts, I'd be curious to get on, just turning the roster over next year. You're going to have some returners. You're going to have some departures. You're also going to have a great story to sell on the recruiting trail going forward and showing what you did in just 1 year and what's possible going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not going to be a situation where you just bring everybody back. Like, there's going to be some ladies that are going to be very tough to replace. On the other hand, it's not going to be one of those things where we see teams across sports where you're looking at it going, man, they're going to have to replace the whole team. So, quick rundown for folks. You are going to have to replace basically the left side of your infield, shortstop and third base. You're going to have to replace Sam Gress. You have to replace both corner outfield spots. I would imagine those are some of the positions you're going to look for in terms of portal. Like, I think for the most part, it's going to be like, hey, just good players. Like, just upgrade across the board where you can. But you would imagine third base, shortstop, they do have a freshman there in Shea Anderson who played a little bit this year. Corner outfield, you lose both your starters who played just about every game this past season. So you're losing a lot of experience, but you get back some key players. You get back Ari Rhoda, you get back Carly Shelton, you get back Lexi Winters, you get back Jory Hurd, Quincy Lilio in center field. So that is a really, really strong core, I think, to build around. And, I'm imagining they're going to be very active in the portal. I think we'll start to hear maybe some of those names here very, very soon. The interesting thing about softball is you can host portal players on your campus during the super regional games. So they had players in watching the games, which I think has got to be something that you can sell on the recruiting trail. And I'm sure we'll probably turn the page after this segment. So I did want to hit on one more thing before we do. I think we got to remember, like, the final 3 outs of a game in baseball or softball. And then let's just put that times 10 when you're talking about the final 3 outs of a season. One of the hardest things to get in sports, like, teams are going to fight you to the proverbial death for those final 3 outs. And, it's easy to point fingers. And I saw a ton of finger pointing online after the game on Saturday. But in a team sport, I know it's cliche, but literally in a team sport, no one player has ever in the history of athletics lost a team sport. So are there some things Carolina would want back from that game? Of course there are. But do you also have to give a tremendous amount of credit to UCLA for not giving up or executing under pressure, to going out there and making the plays in that final inning? I think you got to do that as well. And there was some mistakes, I think, obviously, where you look back, you can't walk the leadoff hitter. You can't have a base running blunder where you walk into the dugout. But Carolina got beat on their shift. They've been shifting teams all year long. So if you're going to live by the shift, sometimes you're going to get caught in the shift. That's just sports. I think there was some second guessing online that I'm just like, guys, this is athletics. Like, sometimes, like, you go out there, you do your absolute best. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes the other team gets you. And that was the case in that last inning.
Yeah, obviously a tough way in the season, but fun nonetheless. And we'll certainly try an effort to get Ashley Chastain Woodard on here soon to kind of give us her recap herself and kind of talk about the excitement level of going into year number 2 in the future of this program as well. We'll keep with the Diamond Sports, switch over to baseball coming up next. A lot of news portal-wise for guys going in and guys staying for year number 2 of the Pulmonary era. We'll dive into that coming up next. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris on your Tuesday on the Game.
Getting to be lunchtime here on the Game, 11:14 a.m. Eastern. And so if you're getting hungry like I am, starting to think about where you want to go for lunch, check out our friends, of course, over at Firehouse Subs. 15 different locations and growing all around the Midlands. We're actually going to be at one of them live on location this Thursday, 2184 West DeKalb Street in Camden, located in Springdale Plaza. Come see us over in Camden. 9 to noon. Store will be open at 10, so about 10 to noon, anytime in there. Come on out. Hopefully we'll have some giveaways. We'll definitely have some Firehouse Subs, or the friendly folks at Firehouse Subs will. If you can't wait until then, if you can't come out to Camden, your other places in the Midlands, go check them out. FirehouseSubs.com. Download the app. That's where you can get all your Firehouse Subs favorites or the limited time hot ones, hook and ladders. Check those out. Earn yourself some rewards points. FirehouseSubs.com or the Firehouse Subs app to use the Rapid Rescue.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West, Chris along with you. As you heard Chris mention a moment ago, Thursday, Schroeder's Towing Roadshow comes out to Firehouse Subs in Camden, 2184 West Cab Street. You can come by and hang out with us from 10 to noon. The store opens up at 10. We'll be out there all morning long, eating some subs and obviously talking all things Gamecock sports as well. We obviously spent the first segment there talking about softball, baseball. We are a week removed from their season ending in the SEC tournament out in Hoover last week, and a lot of questions going into the offseason of what's the roster turnover going to look like? How many guys are going to jump in the portal? How many guys are going to stay? Obviously, there's been some extremely negative headlines around the program in the past week that also caused questions of, okay, what's this going to mean for player movement? We'll start off with a few guys that have decided to jump in the portal so far with Roman Kimball, Ryan Bakes, Caden Gaskins, Wyatt Evans, and Tyler June. Obviously, Bakes, Gaskins, and Kimball, the primary three contributors out of that group so far this year. Kimball's dad had some negative things to say on Facebook a couple weeks ago in reference to year number one with Paul Maneri, so we knew this was coming for Kimball. Bakes obviously transferred over this past offseason, if I'm remembering correctly, from Texas A&M, and obviously Caden Gaskin was somebody that worked himself in the lineup a few times as well. So in terms of guys that did contribute, you are seeing a couple of those guys start trickling to the portal. June 2nd is when it officially opens, so plenty of time between now and then, and obviously for the month that it is open for guys to enter. But those so far, the guys they have lost as the offseason's a week old.
Quick note, Tyler, I think you're thinking of Max Coffer.
Yeah, that's right. I am thinking of Max Coffer.
Right.
Yeah.
So Bakes factored in some.
Yep.
Obviously,
he transferred in 2 years ago.
I think he was just a freshman.
Or was he just freshman? Okay.
Just freshman.
All right.
Just a freshman.
Either way, I had the position right.
You did.
Yeah.
And so Gaskin played a role at times. Kimball obviously got some run in some games. And by the way, you mentioned, what his father had said. He addressed that in his farewell message, saying it, didn't really represent his views. But, was a redshirt junior this season. Honestly, did not have, for whatever reason, and we don't even have to go there, did not have a standout season. And so I think what stands out, just to kind of generalize this, and Wes, feel free to expand, agree, disagree, I don't think any of these are surprising, right? So I might be jumping ahead a little bit here when you kind of look at who's coming back, who has already indicated they're coming back versus who has already indicated they're leaving. I don't think you have any surprises right now in either group. We knew that there was going to be, when you have a season in the year 2025 like you had the past year, you anticipate there's going to be some significant roster turnover. And so I don't think these, 5 guys, that's probably not the end of it. Also not the end of guys, I don't think, who will be announcing their intentions to come back. But so far, nothing extremely surprising if we're talking about the guys that have indicated they're heading on to other things.
Yeah, I mean, Kimball probably the least surprising portal announcement in the history of the portal, considering his father's feelings on the whole subject. Yeah. But I think, and Bakes was a guy, it just hadn't worked out for him, like they were high on his bat when he got here. Matter of fact, I remember hearing like, hey, this guy's got one of those swings where the ball kind of just jumps off his bat. And he was thought of more as an offensive guy who was going to have to settle in defensively at catcher. And, for whatever reason, when he's gotten his opportunities, it just has not worked out at the plate. I think so far, no real surprises, you would say. And then I think so. People are maybe wondering about the timing on some of this stuff. So for one, if you're one of the guys that's going to enter the portal, or if you're a younger player announcing, hey, I'm coming back, a lot of that is because right now, be it that you're too young, or be it that you're just not a guy who, has done enough. The guys announcing the stuff right now are, for the most part, guys who will not have a shot in the draft. So I do think you're going to steadily see some of those announcements, but really there may be a delay here on some of these announcements. Now, we have seen guys enter the portal and then still see if they're going to get drafted. But in terms of guys that may end up staying, there's a lot of guys on that list, like, a Henry Kazmar, a Jace Woida, some kind of older players who were pretty good for Carolina this year once they settled in, that maybe we won't get an announcement one way or the other. And, unless maybe a guy says, hey, I'm going to return, but I'm going to test the draft waters. The MLB draft is kind of different than all the other ones. You don't really have to declare for the draft and then that's it. Obviously, you just wait and see, hey, am I drafted? And then you make a decision. So it is a little bit unique, but certainly, guys, if this thing was going to have any chance of turning around next season, I think it needed to involve KJ Scobie and Bo Hollins returning to the Garnet and Black. So in a tumultuous year and off season so far, that was a pretty big step for this team for next year.
Yeah, obviously those two guys on either side of the infield there for your defense, and two freshmen that came in and made significant impacts, albeit for a struggling team this year. But in terms of what the future of the program is going to be, those guys, Gavin Braylon behind the plate, were kind of looked at as a couple of the guys that you really thought you could potentially build around. You're going to get Talmadge LeCroy back for another year, qualified for the medical red shirt after missing a vast majority of the season. So you do have a couple of guys that were key contributors that are kind of your starting point for building. Yeah. And again, we'll see what the other guys decide to do, whether it be transfer or stick around. But so far, this is what you have. And the question becomes, obviously, and now that we know more details from behind the scenes of, okay, you're going to have the same coaching staff, it looks like, unless something changes between, now and the start of next season, which I'm not saying is the most likely. Can they change? Can they do something better? Can they change their philosophy on things? Can they get the most out of whatever this next team's going to look like they weren't able to get out of this one? Because I can tell you right now, the buzz for next year's team isn't going to be as high as this one's because of underachieving and obviously what we know has gone on behind the scenes now, based on reporting. But again, there's your building blocks, and LeCroy, Hollins, and Scobie to start off with for what next year's team's going to look like.
And a couple guys that are similar in that Hollins and Scobie are were both young players this year, obviously, and you could see the glimpses of their talent, defensively, offensively. They weren't this past season what they eventually will be, and I think they both got a chance to be really good players. LeCroy's a guy that, look, I totally – he's one of those guys where if you go back and, stay away from social media and all those types of things, because there's been some, frankly, I think kind of over-the-top stuff. But he was a guy that, look, the catcher position was unsettled at times. He only got to play in, 17 games? He could have helped there. Yep. And he's a veteran guy who seems to have the respect of his teammates. So I think all three important gets. All three could play varying roles. I think all three will play important roles next season. And so, look, the coaching, strategic, off-season, game prep stuff, yeah, I mean, that'll get sorted out eventually. Those are things that we'll have to get the answers to. What I think we can figure out from now and until then is, what does this class look like? And don't mistake the fact that this team struggled mightily last season. Don't jump to the conclusion that means there are no pieces on this team, because Hollins, Scobie, particularly of them being young players in year one, was still, I think, tremendous upside. Those guys needed to be, I totally agree with you, Wes, they needed to be part of the plan. You can't just say, even in 2025, just go out and get an entirely new team, right? That's not feasible. That's not the way to build a roster. You're gonna need to keep key cornerstone pieces of your roster in place. Got to develop those guys, and then you got to bring in some other pieces too, which I think from what we've heard, what we've passed along on Gamecock Central, is certainly the focus right now, trying to go out, hit JUCO, hit the transfer portal, and then keep as many guys that you want in the program that can help you keep those guys around too.
Yeah, I think with those two guys, man, it would be just brutal if you spent all year long kind of letting your freshmen, highly talented freshmen, but just letting your freshmen kind of figure it out as they go, and then they just left. I mean, that, especially considering that Bo is like Gamecock royalty, grew up Gamecock his entire life, family ties to the program. If he had left, not that you put everything on one player, but if he had left, I think that would be another terrible sign for where things are with this baseball program. But the question now, can you go get some top arms? And I know you can get some good arms in the portal and JUCO, but can you get an elite arm that can shift everybody else back and go be your Friday guy? I think is the biggest question in terms of roster construction moving forward.
It's going to be a very important offseason. Again, portal opens up officially on June the 2nd. We expect to see a lot of movement for South Carolina in and out of the portal, and we'll follow that as it goes along. It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. We'll re-rack a little bit of our conversation with Coach Frey from Friday as we talk about the wide receiver room going into 2025 for South Carolina here on your Tuesday on the Game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West, Chris, along with you on your Tuesday here on the game. On Friday, we were joined by South Carolina wide receiver coach Mike Furry for about 15 minutes. Didn't really get into everything we wanted to talk about with him, but did hit on a few very important things ahead of the 2025 season. A lot of conversation around the freshman wide receivers, which are a very exciting group that we've talked about a lot throughout the spring. Coach Furry talked to us about the message to those freshman wide receivers as they head into the summer.
Yeah, I mean, really, my message the whole time was how fast can you become a veteran in this program, and that means you better get in, you better get sunk in, you better get your body right, you better get your mind right, you better get caught up, and you better be able to put yourself in a position to compete because I'm not going to look at you as a freshman when you come back here and at the end of May. And you've had 4 months now to be in our system. You've been around our weight program. You've done well in academics and obviously with spring ball. So you have a lot of experience already to get ready for the season. And so my message to them the whole time has really been all of them. How fast can you guys get up to speed to allow you to go play? With a better mentality here when you come back in May.
That's something we hear from coaches a lot for guys that are early enrollees, which is kind of the norm now anyway. Like, hey, you're not a freshman anymore. You've already gone through a segment of a season, played a spring game, all the practices and those kind of things. You should know what to expect, be ready for, and all those kind of things. And for 5 out of the 6 freshmen coming in that receiver room, they did partake in spring practice. Last night would have been the first time that Donovan Murph is joining the team and partaking in the summer stuff that begins today and going forward, building up to the start of the season, which is 96 days away. So we got a good look at most of these guys through the spring game, and all those kind of things, and did see glimpses of a lot of those things that you guys talk about from recruiting these guys in high school. And Murph is thought to be one of those guys that is very advanced for somebody coming out of high school, that despite missing spring practice and coming in as a summer guy, he's still going to have an equal opportunity to find his way out on the field because of how good he is, right?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by Murph because on one hand, he's that 6th guy out of this 6-man class. The other 5 already on campus. So, you think about it in a few different ways. You're getting acclimated to just life as a college student athlete. We kind of lose that, right? And it's just like it's a lot different. I mean, for anybody who's made that jump just from high school to college in general, it's different. And you add in being an SEC football player on top of that, it's a lot different. Then you add, the element of being able to go through winter workouts, being able to go through team meetings, being able to go through spring practice. That's a huge benefit to those guys. On the other hand, I felt like Murph was maybe the most ready to play guy out of the group coming out of high school. And so I also think that his mentality, I know you and I, Wes, agree on this. I mean, this is a guy who's got that kind of alpha mindset. And even though he's, reclassified, so he's a year younger, I still feel like he's going to be able to come in and make some noise. So that'll be fascinating to see. But what jumps out to me about this group, and you can really only speak to the 5 who are on campus right now and went through spring ball, it seems like those guys were what they thought they were, in most cases. And seems like they're all going to continue to compete. I don't think, all 6 are not going to be able to play a huge role this season, but can a few of them possibly? So, again, one of the more competitive rooms in the roster, factoring in that freshman class plus the returners on this team, and going to be fascinating to continue watch this one play out throughout the year.
Well, I think, guys, I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was like, all right, tell me legitimately who is the furthest along of this group. And, they were just kind of shaking their head because it's kind of been one of those things where maybe in the beginning, these 2 guys create a little bit of buzz, and then as maybe winter workouts or whatever, spring ball starts, then a couple of other guys kind of catch up to them. And then by the end of the spring, I mean, literally it was looked like all these guys have a chance to help. And, Furry in that interview went highly detailed with us on what each guy brings to the table. And, I was kind of playing in my mind with something we always do every year, the try to predict who's going to redshirt and who's going to play. And it gets a little bit more difficult when you're talking about how, some guys will maybe play a few games but still redshirt. But I was like, is it conceivable that all 6 of these guys avoid redshirt? So I think just from what you've heard about the talent, the ability, and you can't, maybe a guy gets dinged up and that factors in. But if you just took a random 3 or 4 guys out of the 6 and that was the class, you'd say, well, yeah, all 3 or 4 of those guys are probably going to play. But just from a number standpoint, is there room for all 6 guys to find their way onto the field and avoid a red shirt? I'm not sure, especially when you talk about the 4 returnees really taking a step forward as well. So I think that's going to be fascinating. The thing about Murph to me that really stands out is, to Chris's point, this kid is a dog on the field. Like, he has that competitive edge, that competitive mindset. But then off the field, he's very deliberate. He's very thoughtful about how he approaches things. He's not a guy that's just gonna have just showed up yesterday and been like, all right, how do we start this thing? Like, he has been preparing. He's been at as many of the spring practices as he could possibly attend. He was already there. He's had a workout program. He's been diving into the playbook as much as he could already. This kid is deliberate about how he gets himself ready, both from a physical and mental standpoint. So I think what are you talking about? 10 guys, 4 returnees and 6 newcomers. All 10 guys are going to push each other. And both fortunately and unfortunately, as we sit here at the end of May, it's still very difficult to predict which of these guys will be the kind of cream of the crop that rises to the top.
We'll talk about some of those returners as we wrap up today's show coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Tuesday on the Game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. It's always Chris along with you for a few more minutes before we turn things over to the halftime show with Terry Ford on your Tuesday, talking a lot about wide receivers. We obviously listened to a little bit of what Coach Furry told us on Friday about messaging to freshman receivers ahead of their first summer here in Columbia. Obviously, 5 of them were here for the spring. Donovan Murph joining the team this week as a summer enrollee. And again, 96 days to kick off before we see those guys in action for the first time. But when you kind of look at the guys returning, kind of making up that group of 10, you obviously have guys like Nick Harbor, who started to come along more as the season went along last year. Mazio Bennett, who came in as a true freshman and made an immediate impact. But then you have 2 guys in Vendrevius Jacobs and Jared Brown, who dealt with injuries throughout last year. We saw more of Jared Brown than Vendrevius Jacobs, but both guys that we expect to play a big role in this offense, hopefully can stay healthy, obviously. And for Jared Brown, be his final season here in Columbia, and Vendrevius Jacobs, only his second season, third season overall playing college football, is somebody that we knew was going to come in and be somebody that could develop and continue to get better over his time here in Columbia.
Yeah, I mean, those 2 guys in some ways have been forgotten. And I'll tell you why. I think you got the 6-man freshman class, a lot of focus on that because they're new and they are talented, and we've gotten some glimpses of that. And Mike Furry and Shane Beamer have said really good things about those guys. You've got Nick Harbor, who is always an object of fascination for South Carolina fans for good reason. You even got Mazio Bennett, who was a freshman last year and kind of took that step forward. And so you've gotten some glimpses from Jacobs and from Brown. The one that, Shane Beamer's talked about, and Mike Furry brought it up with us last week, was the screen pass against Missouri where Jared Brown gets the ball and you're going, oh, that's what that looks like. As you said, Tyler, both had some injuries that at times hampered them, but I think you put those guys right up there because they've got experience. Jacobs is going into year 3. Brown's going into, year 5, I think, of college football. So they're both relatively pretty experienced, especially Jared Brown, and both going into another season here at South Carolina working with Mike Furry. So when we're thinking about, like you said, Wes, 10 guys in this room, I think those guys should very much be part of the conversation. And we saw Jacobs, had a really good spring game, and we've seen those glimpses from Jared Brown, 2 talented guys who I think can do some things for you within this offense.
Yeah, and we got to remember, as exciting as these freshmen are, they're all going to have to pass the 4 guys in front of them, right? If they're gonna start, obviously there's some room to play there. I think you're typically looking at, if you play in a modern kind of spread-ish, pro-style-ish offense where you play 3 receivers a lot, you can play 6 guys. You can maybe play that 7th or 8th in some certain situations. But for the most part, you kind of have the 3 guys, and then you have the 3 guys behind them. So you're looking at 4 spots and then maybe 2 additional spots in terms of the numbers. And, I think all 4 of those guys, at least from what we've heard and what Mike Furry told us, they have, taken a notice of what's coming up behind them. So I think that has pushed them to be even better. And I'll be curious, is there a slight change to maybe how those guys are used? You are talking about, for one, Furry having a little bit more say as the passing game coordinator now. 2, you're talking about a new offensive coordinator. Now, granted, it's not going to be wholesale changes, but there was some talk last year, who's going to play the slot, who's going to play outside. Jared Brown actually was probably one of my favorite guys that they added from the portal last year when you looked at what he did at Coastal Carolina. This guy was a menace with the ball in his hands. So, they played him a little bit more, I think, outside last year. Mazio playing inside. Who's going to play the slot this year? Does Brian Rowe factor into that? How exactly do you use a Jared Brown? I do think we saw him on some of the, kind of that little quasi, triple option stuff they would do as the pitch guy. We saw him on jet sweeps. I think Jared Brown is a guy certainly you look at and say it doesn't have to just be run a route downfield and catch the football. He's someone I think you're going to get the most out of him if you make a deliberate effort to use his skill set in a way that kind of allows him to succeed.
Well, and it can't be understated as well that, compared to last year where you had a lot of confidence but didn't know for sure what Lenore Sellers was going to be. Now you're dealing with one of the better returning college football quarterbacks this upcoming season in an offense that is going to, according to Mike Shula, help refine him as a passer a little bit there, stay in the pocket and those kind of things that can hopefully benefit the wide receiver room for having somebody so talented and skilled throwing to them that hopefully those guys can, a match on their side of things and hopefully help this offense be as great as we hope it can be.
Well, and I think we all expect that the offense has a chance to be better and also think that it probably needs to be better going into this season, just because of some of the questions on defense. But you also, that's part of it, right? But you also look at it and go, okay, you've got a year 2 starter in Lenore Sellers. You lose Rocket Sanders. That's difficult. But can you maybe have more than one guy that seems more ready in that running back room? You certainly on paper have more depth at receiver. Can that room as a whole be better? Can your offensive line be better overall? And if you can answer some of those questions, they're all going to work in harmony, right, to where everybody looks better. So, I mean, Mike Furry has not been shy about what he wants to build in this receiver room. And with some of the talent they brought in, they're on their way. There's a mix of veterans and youth. And, again, I'm fascinated to continue watching it.
Just 96 days away from kickoff. As Coach Furry said to us the other day, it's going to go by in the blink of an eye. We'll be playing that first game against Virginia Tech coming up in Atlanta on August the 31st. That'll do it for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Coming up next, halftime show with Terry Ford on your Tuesday here on the Game.